Hi, welcome back to our weekly Instagram live sessions from the Sydney Mokum Design Studio. And for those that are joining us, what we're trying to do is give you an insight into our design and development process. And for those of first timers, I'm Stephanie Moffat, Mokum Design Director.
Hi, and I'm Annie Moyer, Mokum's Product Developer. Thanks so much for joining us today. This session we're going to give you a behind the scenes look into our custom colour development process when colouring and developing a plain woven textile.
Yeah, so we have really unique environmental conditions in Australasia. We talk about it a lot, but it actually has a huge impact on how we colour product, particularly at the clear and clean light. It really amplifies colour when we bring them into the studio. Often we're in Europe and travelling, looking at colour lines, and they look really appropriate in the diffused lighting. But when we bring them back to Sydney and we review them, we realise that they're too saturated, so we often have to pare back the colour or grey it off more.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we crack into our creative process, we wanted to first start with just recapping on a couple of important textile terms, and that is warp and weft. And most of you will be really familiar with these terms, but for those that aren't, we just wanted to start with this first because it's something that we refer to a lot, and the wider textile community use them constantly. So this is a simple illustration of a standard loom, and if you can imagine here that this is the roll of fabric coming off the loom, the physical edge is referred to as the selvage, and any yarns running across the roll from selvage to selvage are always referred to as weft yarns. And an easy way to remember that is weft to left. And then the yarns that run up and down the roll are always referred to as the warp yarn. So as a physical example, we just had a roll here of beautiful Palermo, which is a new Mokum product. And you can see here, this is the selvage on the edge. And in this case, the weft yarn is black. You can see that the black yarn is running across the roll. And the warp yarn here is the white yarn, which is running up and down the roll. So warp and weft, really important terms to have a thorough understanding of.
So now we want to show you, before we go into the process, some examples of what yarn dyed and piece dyed products are. And first we're going to start with yarn dyed, and that is when the spun yarns are dyed first and woven into a fabric. And this is where multicoloured textiles are created, and you get a lot of interest coming in the weft. First we have Sahil, which is a stunning Italian chenille upholstery. I have it on my sofa at home, and it's woven in a blend of natural and synthetic fibres, which really improve the performance. We often use blends. We like the natural for the touch and the synthetic to improve the to improve the performance. And it has a beautiful soft handle that comes from the chenille yarn, and it really is a true Mokum classic. Next we have Nirvana, a bit of a favourite band from the 90s. I'm showing my age. Nirvana has a multicoloured mix of yarns, and most of these are sitting through the weft. That's where you tend to get a lot more of the complex yarns, and the warp tends to be a finer, more simpler yarn. And Nirvana has a really comprehensive palette. You've got these peaceful pastels and sitting amongst mid-century combinations, balanced of course by core neutrals, and a Teflon finish. Nirvana has that practical element to it, but also it's beautiful and durable. And then we move into latest release, which is our strata, and we wanted to give you an example of a really dimensional textile where you can see very thick yarns used, and you get much more of a contrast when you use this kind of combination, where you have the dark and the light contrasting against each other. This is a really tactile upholstery, again woven in Italy. A lot of our upholstery comes from northern Italy, and strata is highly durable and it's suitable for commercial and residential applications.
And the other really common dyeing technique for a plain textile is that of piece dyeing. So as opposed to yarn dyeing, where the yarns are first dyed and then woven, a piece dyed product, the fabric is woven first, and in its undyed form it's referred to as a greige, and then it is dyed all together in its piece form. And different finishing techniques are used to often create interesting surface patterns and sort of irregularities, but on the whole, a piece dyed product will showcase a singular colour. We wanted to illustrate 3 examples of our most favourite piece dyed products, and we're starting first with, of course, the beautiful Eternal, which is 100% linen. It's piece dyed and it has a beautiful artisan energy finish that provides a soft tumbled handle and sophisticated antique surface interest. Eternal is an amazing multi-purpose textile. It's appropriate for drapery and upholstery and is one of Mokum's top selling products. Eternal has been custom coloured with an extensive palette of 35 shades, including core neutrals, some beautiful earthen organic hues, as well as some lovely pared back feminine tones. We love Eternal and it's been incredibly well received in our market. The next illustration is the beautiful allium, which is a reasonably new quality to the Mokum range. Woven in Italy, allium is a quintessential blended composition which showcases a subtle luster and a really practical stain repellent finish. Allium also has an extensive colour line of decorative shades and a really comprehensive offering of warm and cool neutrals. And allium suits, it's got a very structured weave and it suits casual and also highly tailored furniture frames. Here it's photographed on the beautiful curved noon sofa by Stylecraft, and you can see that this curved arm on the sofa really highlights its beautiful subtle luster, and it upholstered beautifully. It looked absolutely amazing. And we wanted to show an illustration of a piece dyed product on a pile textile, and of course we had to show the beautiful alpaca velvet, which we absolutely love. This is a luxurious wool blend woven in Italy. Alpaca velvet's dense dry pile suits both traditional and also very contemporary frames and lends itself perfectly to curvaceous shape, as seen here on the Kelly chair by Jardin. Alpaca velvet is loved by both the residential and the commercial markets, and it's been in our line for a number of years and comfortably sits within our top selling products.
So now we're going to talk to you about how we create the colour instructions for these two types of structures. First we have we're going to talk about yarn dyed, and we thought the best way would be to show you how we a blanket. So when you're working on a yarn dyed, you work with the mill's yarn bank, which is really their stocked yarns. Yeah. This is an example, and we use a combination of their stocked yarns, but also we work very much with custom colour to get the desired colour line that we've been talking about.
Often using Pantone references.
Yeah, Pantone references or cuttings from our existing line or new shades we want to add. And then we write a blanket instructions where you specify the warp, and this is your warp, and it's in blocks of colour. And often this is where warp, you try and specify less options, and the warp yarn bank tends to be smaller, and mills prefer not to custom colour warps as much as possible, but they're happy to add as much custom into the weft as possible. And here you see the weft options running horizontal in blocks of colour. Then we begin, on arrival, after it's woven, we begin the laborious and blistering task of cutting the blankets. And we want to shout out to our Sydney team, who we often, when we're under the pump, the showroom team and our friends in the office come over and help us. And so we thank them. We know it's painful.
Yes, blisters often on the hands cutting these, especially the outdoor products, which are so thick and quite hard to cut through. Yeah. So as Steph said, the blankets arrive and we start the process of elimination and start to refine and curate our final colour palette. And we do so by physically making piles of yes, no and maybe. And then we refer back through these piles again and again until we have whittled down to our final colour palette. And what we love about our yarn dyed product, and specifically the blanket technique, is sometimes these almost beautiful mistakes can happen. And by that I mean where a warp and a weft combination comes together, which we haven't specifically specified, but that looks absolutely amazing, and it ends up making it into the final colour line. So that's always a nice surprise.
Yeah, and then the second way we do colour instructions is for piece dyeing, and we primarily work with Pantone colours and fabric swatches, which we send to the mill, and then within their in-house laboratory they dye the greige cloth we've selected in our colour line. And we wanted to show you some examples of what a lab dip is, and you can see they're very small. This is an example of velvet lab dips. And then we start the process of, much like the yarn dyed scenario, of reducing down the colour line and in some cases, once we've reduced our colour line down, we then ask the mill to dye our hit list in A4 pieces, because particularly with velvet and fabrics with sheen, colour reads so differently from different directions, and so before we go ahead and commit to the colour, we like to see it in a larger piece. It's very hard to work with such a small chip, but it is part of the process and you do adapt.
Yeah, so when making the final colour selection for any new development, back in the studio, for Steph and I, it's really a balancing act between looking to the past with really thorough analysis of sales data on historical product, and that way we can be really confident that all of our new constructions and developments have those volume selling really important core products, colours, which are often neutral. Surprise, surprise. But it's also that balancing act between looking at the past and also looking to the future with colour trend forecasting and trend colours that we want to inject, and really driving the palette in the direction that we want the brand to head. And being that people tend to, on average, redecorate their home every 10 to 15 years, we ensure that our designs and also our colour palettes are both timely and timeless. And it's really important for neutrals to be a core aspect of any new development. We always start by ensuring that we have a comprehensive offering of warm and cool neutrals. And it's not until we get the neutrals right that we start to layer in and introduce these fashion-driven trend tones.
And often we'll introduce colours that speak to the theme of the range as well, as part of trying to illustrate that within the collection. So throughout this colour process, we always ensure that the colours work back with the other planes within the collection and the patterns, and then we look to the historic Mokum classics within the line to ensure that anything new we're introducing works back with our existing range, because it's really important for us for the Mokum brand to be holistic and agile for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of last session, we were asked a really important question of what is the difference between an Australasian colour palette and a European colour palette, for example. And this is a topic that Steph and I sort of live and breathe every day here in the studio. And we thought that it would actually justify its own Instagram live session. So next Tuesday, we're going to really delve into discussing what do we mean by an Australasian colour palette.
We'll give you some examples against European palettes, and because what we've discovered having gone into international markets, it's something that makes our brand unique and also makes it more appropriate for how we live in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
So we wanted to thank you for tuning in today, and hopefully we'll see you next week, and stay safe out there, keep creating, kia kaha.
Thank you, bye.